I've always looked forward to every new season of The Boys from the moment it first premiered on Prime Video. The show's blend of superhero parody, corporate critique, and allusions to modern-day political topics was always handled effectively, in a way that offered a perfect mixture of humor, gross-out, and engaging storytelling. This is aided by a cast of interesting, dynamic characters, both human and soup alike, who have made the series into a powerhouse parody that hits all the right buttons for me. Seasons 1 and 2 in particular were fantastic, with plenty of interesting characters and a story that seemed to be going in an interesting direction. Season 3 was also fairly entertaining, although I did find it to be slightly weaker than the first two. This was especially apparent in the Season 3 finale, which felt like it rushed Homelander and Ryan's reunion and seemed to end on a rather generic note for a show that had been so unpredictable before now. But with Homelander lasering a Starlight supporter's face off in the Season 3 finale, I had hoped Season 4 would be just as memorable as everything that had come before. Even the spin-off, Gen V, had me excited for what was coming next. With its small teases that Homelander was going to be on trial, coupled with what appeared to be the beginnings of a soup uprising, I had a lot of faith Season 4 was going to be propelling the narrative forward in an interesting way. I thought my irks with the Season 3 finale were just small flukes in the grand scheme of things, and that everything to come would be just as good as before. But Season 4 feels like it's had the weakest opening out of every season so far, and it makes me worried about what the rest of the upcoming episodes are going to entail. This video isn't going to be a play-by-play of everything that happened in episodes 1 through 3 of The Boys Season 4. Instead, it will be my general thoughts as to why I personally feel that this season is starting off on the wrong foot. Spoilers ahead for the first 3 episodes. Now, before I get into what I don't like so far about The Boys Season 4, I have to give credit to all the strengths the season has shown so far, and those highlights have to do with the development of some of its core characters. Following the end of Season 3, Billy Butcher is now dealing with the fact he only has a few months to live after abusing Temp V for so long. Because of his brash decision-making, seemingly brought on by his illness, MM decides to kick him off the team. What's followed is Butcher trying to make things right before his untimely death, forming a stronger bond with Ryan in a storyline that's been really heartwarming so far. Butcher's always been a hard-ass when it comes to, well, literally everything, so to see him in a more docile position, wrestling with his mortality while trying to do right, has been compelling, especially when he decides to toss the cookies he made to drug Ryan, showing he can put aside his prejudice for soups to do the right thing. It's character development that really has me engaged and makes me wonder where they're going to be taking him in the future. But while Butcher is trying to be more human with Ryan, Homelander is trying to change his son into a psychopathic monster, just like him. Anthony Starr continues to play the leader of the Seven perfectly, capturing his dwindling mental state and imposing attitude flawlessly. I think this season is doing a great job so far of showing just how close to the edge he finally is. From the moment he plucked out that gray pube of his in episode 1, I knew he was about to go off the deep end. While he's immune to almost everything, the one thing he can't stop himself from doing is aging, and to have something so natural be the final straw for him feels really fitting, especially as he continues flaunting control over Vought, the Seven, and Ryan. The interactions between Homelander and Ryan are especially unsettling, as it's clear he's trying to turn a scared little boy into a murderous soldier. Personally, I don't see him succeeding, but it's because it feels like he won't, and because Ryan has placed so much trust in him, that his actions so far have been all the more foreboding. His entourage of political supporters also make him feel untouchable, giving off the vibe that he and they are going to do something unforgivable before the season is over. Beyond Butcher and Homelander, there are a few smaller things that I'm enjoying about the season as well. Sister Sage, while not a perfect character, is an interesting foil to Homelander, with their interactions being a perfect blend of calculating intelligence meets adamant pride. I'm curious about what her real plans might actually be, and how she'll display more of her intelligence going forward. A-Train's storyline is also starting to interest me, as it seems to be following a few seasons of build-up to him eventually joining the boys. With him now helping them out as a spy by the end of episode 3, it seems his redemption arc is well on its way to being completed. And beyond the story itself, there have been some neat moments too. Victoria's daughter being a freaky worm-faced soup was wild, as was how the audience learned Victoria's pretty much unkillable. I liked Frenchie's drug trip too. I thought that was a really creative way of having a fun action sequence in the middle of an episode. And I'm cautiously optimistic that Firecracker is going to be a more compelling character going forward too, since I like what I've seen of her so far. I want to illustrate these positives to say that, while there are some elements of The Boys Season 4 that have worked really well for me so far, there's a lot that doesn't work. And it's these negatives that have me worried about the rest of the season and whether or not it's going to get back on the right track. Maybe it's too early to judge, but since 3 out of 8 episodes are already out, I also think it's a reasonable time to share my worries about how the rest of this season is going to go. And it all really comes down to one simple thing: the character storylines. There is a lot going on in this season of The Boys. Homelander trying to gain as much power as possible in Vought with Sage while teaching Ryan how to be a soup. Butcher trying to make up for lost time with his wife's son by being a better person to both him and the boys themselves. taking on a leadership role now that Butcher's out of commission. And, of course, the boys overall trying to take down Victoria before she can gain any political power. Everything I've just listed are the core parts of the Boys Season 4's story, but in between all of that are a lot of side plots. Huey's got a side plot, Frenchie's got a side plot, Kimiko's got a side plot, Starlight has a side plot that kind of ties into the main plot, and while it's cool to see all these characters doing their own thing, a lot of them just aren't very interesting. And I think the biggest issue is the writing so far this season just hasn't been up to par with the rest of the show. There's still some good in the show, as I illustrated at the start, but the bad is starting to outweigh it and makes me worried about how the rest of the season is going to shape up. To start off, we have Starlight's storyline about her life after the Seven. She's teaming up with the boys to take down Victoria, and she's also serving as a good Samaritan with her Starlight house. But now her big project is coming under fire due to conspiracy theories that her program is a front for human trafficking, specifically involving children. Now, it's no surprise the boys would have a political side plot, obviously. The boys has always dabbled in really pointed political satire, and Season 3 set up a conflict between what are essentially superhero versions of two very real, very opposing political groups. Unfortunately, the whole conflict feels kind of underdeveloped compared to a lot of the politics tackled in prior seasons. There are allusions to real-world events, with a rather on-the-nose reference to the 2015 Pizzagate conspiracy theories in one episode, but it comes across as kind of shallow compared to other ways the show has tackled political ideas before. The sequence of the guy who got radicalized by Stormfront in Season 2, for instance, had a lot more potency to its message than Season 4's attempts at addressing politics. The satire around the Starlight House conflict just feels off the cuff and underdeveloped compared to previous satire attempts. But I don't think the show tackling politics as a topic is really the issue here. Instead, I feel disconnected from Starlight House because, well, I don't really know much about it. And this is a big problem with a lot of the storylines in Season 4, even the relatively stronger ones. Starlight House is supposed to be helping kids, and based on all the trafficking conspiracy theories, must have made some level of progress in the time jump. But none of that feels apparent on screen. Instead, we just get some people working with Annie and trying to make her image marketable despite hanging up her superhero identity. I feel the lack of real development with Starlight House is making the political satire fall flat. I know Starlight House isn't trafficking kids because that's what I've been told, but I also haven't seen what they've been doing to help kids that curbs these conspiracy theories. Obviously, there's nothing sinister going on, but I want to see that so I feel more connected to what's going on. And so far, I just feel apathy every time the subject comes up. It weakens the show's ability to be a powerful political satire, while also making it unapparent what exactly Starlight's role this season is supposed to be. But if the boys had a king and queen of unclear roles this season, those crowns would go to Frenchie and Kimiko. These two have always been my favorite characters in the show, right from the moment Frenchie rescued her in Season 1. And while they've often had their own side plots that haven't always tied succinctly into the rest of the story, their adventures have always managed to be a really enjoyable part of every season. But with Season 4, it kind of feels like their characters are treading water, with one development in particular being pretty disappointing in my eyes. And that has to do with Frenchie's new love interest this season, Colin. Now, before anyone says anything, I want to get this out of the way right now. Frenchie has always been bisexual. It's been hinted at through the dialogue, especially in Seasons 1 and 3, that he's had relationships with men in the past. In fact, it's heavily implied in a Season 2 flashback that him, Cherie, and Jay were in a polyamorous relationship together. So Frenchie being with a guy, in this case, Colin, would line up with his preferences as the show has previously established them. But from a writing perspective, I feel as though this relationship kind of came out of nowhere, and a big reason for this is because of the way the writers have built up the relationship between him and Kimiko. While the pair have always been a dynamic duo, it always felt like there was a budding romance between them slowly being developed. They even kissed in Season 3, which made me think they were going to get together by the end of the series. So when Frenchie is suddenly sleeping with this guy who we haven't met yet, it felt like whiplash in terms of his development, especially given how close him and Kimiko are. Now, I've seen some discussion about how a Frenchie-Kimiko romance was denied at the end of Season 3, with Kimiko saying that while their kiss felt good, it also felt like they were more than love interests, but family. But saying that kind of comes off as clunky dialogue that doesn't do a great job at telegraphing their lack of romance, especially after what felt like 3 seasons of very clear romantic buildup. That's why when Kimiko tells Frenchie they're not happening in Episode 1, it feels like it comes completely out of nowhere. I gotta be honest, I always saw these two as the stable couple among the whole group, kind of the invisible glue that holds everyone together. So to see their romance get axed seemingly out of the blue just didn't feel great to watch. Now, chances are this whole Colin thing isn't going to work out, seeing as Frenchie murdered his whole family and left him orphaned as a boy. But overall, this plot just feels like we're wasting time with Frenchie falling off the wagon over a guy who the audience doesn't know, and who I think has only had 3 or 4 scenes since we met him. It just feels like the writers don't know what to do with Frenchie's story this season, and decided to use his bisexuality to attempt some kind of romantic drama. And honestly, with the story itself feeling like a bland retread of his season 3 story, and it putting a damper on the Frenchie Kimiko dream team, it leaves me incredibly uninterested and kind of frustrated with this storyline this season. As for Kimiko's, it seems to be just getting started, but illustrates a much bigger issue I have with this season so far. While the first 2 episodes have her as a kind of aimless side character trying to push Frenchie toward his relationship with Colin, the 3rd episode started to deliver on the idea that even more of her past is going to be explored. Her and Frenchie come across this girl with a scar on her face who runs off after fighting with them. It turns out to be someone from Kimiko's past who she wants to find. Now, maybe it's too early to judge this storyline, since it literally just got established last episode, but it feels like it's setting the stage for too big a retread of Kenji at the start of Season 2. Honestly, when it comes to both Frenchie and Kimiko, I feel like I know enough about their pasts to grasp what their roles should be in the present day. Any additional information just feels kinda unnecessary, and to have their storylines so centralized around their pasts 4 seasons in makes it feel like we're treading water with them. Their stories don't feel connected to the main plot, and kinda feel like a waste of time right now. Also, put a pin in the Season 2 retread thing, we're coming back to that in a minute. But I think the character getting the shortest end of the stick so far this season is Huey, the central protagonist of the show. He's currently spent the last few episodes focused on his dad, who suffered a stroke and might not be able to live a normal life again, if he lives at all. This also comes with the return of his mother, who abandoned him when he was really little. The storyline feels like the most disconnected out of them all so far, with Huey basically learning why his mom left him as a kid. It feels like it's a more symbolic storyline, with Huey learning to forgive his mom, giving him the maturity to forgive A-Train once he becomes a more trusted member of the boys. At least, that's what I'm predicting based on the themes involved with his mom's return. But the seeds for an A-Train redemption arc were already planted throughout seasons 2 and 3, making Huey's mom coming back feel like it's doing nothing but stalling for time. And that is the biggest issue I have with all of these side plots and smaller character stories this season. They all feel like they're wasting too much time. The story feels like we haven't really progressed much since around the back half of Season 2. Homelander has Ryan again and is trying to teach him how to use his powers despite his reluctance to hurt people. The only reason Ryan is with Homelander is out of childish spite for his family, in this case Butcher instead of Becca. Homelander's teamed up with a female superhero who is on his level to some extent and is learning from her how to properly take control of his life and what he wants. MM and Butcher are fighting over control of the boys, causing internal conflict despite the desperation of their situation. Frenchie and Kimiko are still exploring their pasts, something that's been happening since all the way back in Season 1. Starlight is dealing with people who don't believe in her, in particular a female rival who is in the 7. A lot of the bare-bones basics of Season 4 feel like they've been ripped mostly from Season 2, which would be fine if anything new or exciting was being done with them. But right now, it just feels like the show is treading water at the start, not so much easing audiences back into the story as it is bringing the story to a standstill. Now, like I said at the start of this video, I do like The Boys, and I want to see the show succeed and prove me wrong as Season 4 progresses. For all I know, this was a stupid video to make, and the next 5 episodes are going to be some of the best in the whole show. But this week's start has me worried that this is going to be the majority of Season 4, having characters go around in circles pursuing uninteresting storylines that feel too disconnected from the main plot. Given how central Huey, Starlight, Frenchie, and Kimiko in particular have been to the story since the start, I really want to see them have a stronger role in the core story of taking down Victoria and Homelander. It would make for a much better time than watching them completing side quests that, at the end of the day, I'm just not interested in, or that I just don't like all that much. Be that as it may, there's still plenty of intriguing things The Boys Season 4 still has to address. The end of Episode 1 featured what looked like something crawling around in Butcher's head. It makes me wonder if there's some kind of parasite attached to Temp V that's making him sick, and getting it out could be the key to saving his life. Then again, that probably would have shown up on the doctor scans in the Season 3 finale, but a man can dream, right? I'm also interested in learning more about Black Noir too, even if his "I shouldn't be talking but I'm talking" joke is starting to wear a little thin. And even though it's liable to be a retread from Season 1, I am curious to see more details about Homelander's past in the upcoming episodes. Because even when his storylines aren't great, Starr still kills it as the Homelander. So yeah, I just felt like making this video because I didn't really think The Boys Season 4 was off to a great start, and wanted to share my thoughts as to why. I'm sure most don't agree with everything I said, which is totally fine, because I could get proven wrong over the next 5 weeks. I'm hoping a lot of this stuff gets resolved over time, but I felt like venting my frustrations over the first 3 episodes. I'll probably make another video as we get further into the season to see if anything's improved, and hopefully I'll be able to say it got better. This has been Zeno, and I'll see you again in the space between spaces.